بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وأسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I welcome you all in this fifth and last session of this long marathon that we've had in terms of knowledge sharing on Zakah. I think it's very, very important for us to keep in mind that even a second or a minute spent in learning, there's great rewards attached to it, and more so in the month of Ramadan. So I don't think any one of us that have participated in these 5 sessions, you should take it for granted that what you did was a small thing. There's various forms of ibadah in Islam. One of the most important forms of ibadah is the ibadah of acquiring knowledge, especially knowledge of something which itself is wajib and farad. So Islam demands that if anything becomes wajib upon you, the acquisition and gaining knowledge of that also becomes wajib. So this is something that we should hope for reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now we thank Allah azza wa jal that He has kept us healthy. And now we are halfway into the month of Ramadan. It is not a small feat, it is a blessing and achievement from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think in the last 5 weeks, I personally enjoyed the sessions, the interactions from you people, and I hope that you really, really benefited and it was a fruitful endeavor or an engagement, inshallah. So for today's session, we're not going to cover a lot of meat, a lot of details. Quite a lot of what we're going to cover, inshallah, are things that you've probably covered in the previous weeks. But we just thought, the important aspects that normally when we conduct the Zakah sessions, these aspects come up every now and then. And it's very, very important for us to give an additional emphasis to them. And obviously, towards the end, we are open for any further questions. So we hope this last session will definitely clarify some sort of misconceptions or certain questions that were lingering in your mind and you have not had the opportunity to ask, or you have not had an interaction one-on-one where you could discuss these with somebody. So the topic for today is misconceptions of Zakah and finalizing Zakah obligations. Now that you've covered all the knowledge, the theory that you needed to cover in relation to Zakah, we come to the finalizing of the Zakah obligations, inshallah. So before going into the practical steps and for me explaining to you how do you go about now that you've identified that you are someone that needs to pay Zakah, let's cover some of the misconceptions, common misconceptions that generally arise. So generally, people have this mindset or this belief that Zakah should be paid in Ramadan. Certainly, doing any type of good deed during the month of Ramadan, we know from the authentic hadith from the Prophet ﷺ that the Prophet ﷺ used to be most generous during the month of Ramadan. So I guess that's where the confusion comes about. Some people hear that, the Prophet used to be generous during the month of Ramadan, so they tend to think that this generosity is linked to the payment of Zakah. Obviously, there's absolutely nothing. If your date happens to fall in the month of Ramadan, excellent, there's barakah. But Zakah is an obligation of its own. Some people pay in Muharram, some people pay in Rajab, some people pay whenever your date falls in. As you might have, you must be knowing by now, we speak about the whole, the date at which you became an owner of Nisab. So the misconception that Zakah should be paid in Ramadan, it is something that needs to be fixed. But if your date is already in Ramadan, there's no need to try to change it now. It's just something that we thought is important that people do not think it's compulsory or it's wajib for Zakah to be paid in the month of Ramadan. Some people have this misconception that you do not have to pay outstanding Zakah. Just like if you have missed Salah, we know Salah is farad, it's compulsory upon every believer. Is there some Salahs that you missed in the past? Those Salahs are still outstanding. So it is important for you to make up for those prayers. So in a similar manner, it might have happened that in the past, you were probably had the nisab threshold for whatever reason, maybe out of neglect or out of lack of knowledge. You were not aware that you were liable at that point to pay zakah. You have to, at the best, the best of your ability, determine at what point did I own the nisab? At what point did I become liable to pay zakat? Try to determine as best as possible, and then if you cannot exact it, you try to exact it, probably looking at your bank statements, thinking about the time maybe where you may have received a lump sum of money, thinking about a time where your salary might have increased, or thinking about a time where you may have started investments. You try to be as exact as possible. Failing which, after you've tried, then you make the best possible estimation that this is the date, and then you keep to that. Allah will not hold you accountable for something that you do not have full knowledge of, as long as you've tried and you've done due diligence, and then you pay for the previous years. If you cannot pay all at once, you try to pay little by little, meaning every year that you pay for this particular year, you take a certain portion and add it to it. Every year you take a certain portion and add it to it, so that you eventually, inshallah, make up for your zakah. And then this is very important that you know this in your will as well, because your heirs or people who inherit from you may not be aware that you're owing zakah. Remember, zakah is an obligation. Before they distribute the funds amongst the heirs, it's important for them to understand that you're owing zakah for so many years in the past. So this is something that you should put in your will, so that your people who inherit from you are aware with regards to it. Another common misconception people tend to have is that zakah is paid on your salary. I remember some people run businesses, but there's a majority of people who work for companies, they work for other businesses. So people tend to think that on the salary that I earn on a monthly basis, do I take out a certain percentage from there and pay zakah? No, you don't pay zakah from your salary, because remember, generally the salary that you get for a lot of people, it is actually consumed within the month. That is a salary that keeps you afloat throughout the month. And some people, even before the month end, you would find they have absolutely no salary left with them. So zakah is not a monthly payment in relation to salary. Zakah only relates to your surplus savings, as you might have seen when we did the conditions of zakah, when does one become liable to pay zakah. So any surplus savings that you have saved and an entire year has passed over, that is what you pay your zakah on. And then we've got another misconception where people think zakah cannot be given to family members. Yes, there is a clause, or there is an exception where it is stated that you as a zakah payer cannot give zakah to your own parents, your grandparents, or your great-grandparents. Neither can you give it to your own children, your grandchildren, and so meaning all your ascendants and all your descendants cannot be given your zakah. But any other relative, your brother, your sister, your uncle, any other relative other than these can be given zakah. That's very important. You cannot pay zakah by way of goods in kind. So this is another misconception. Maybe people may think that you may pay zakah only in cash. You pay zakah in cash, but you can pay zakah in goods in kind as well. But in this particular clause, it's very, very important for us to understand that when you pay in goods in kind, let's say someone is a businessman, right? The type of goods that you are giving for your zakah, it should not be inferior type of goods. It should not be things that will not benefit the poor. It should not be things that it actually makes it difficult for the poor to make use of. So if those are the type of things that you possess, for example, you're selling a whole lot of chairs and tables. Generally, a poor person would not need a whole lot of chairs and tables, or they see you selling beds, unless you've determined to say this person came to me and is a zakatable individual, they definitely need a bed for their house, or they need chairs. But under normal circumstance, you cannot just give someone 100 chairs and some tables and say, this is my zakah. You're making it difficult on the poor person. So in that way, rather give them cash, because why? Cash is much more liquid. So it's important to understand that the only thing that we're trying to clarify, that a person may think that I've got groceries, I'm running a grocery shop. Can I give zakah as these groceries, or I cannot? You can. But the very important aspect is that you try as best as possible to give what is most beneficial to the recipients. If you feel money is going to be most beneficial, give them money. If you feel groceries are going to be most beneficial, you as a zakah giver, give them the grocery. You don't just make your own discretion, with things that are not beneficial for the poor. Another misconception, some people think zakah is a once-off payment. What do we mean by this? An individual pays zakah today, maybe they receive some money, or they are zakah payers, and they think forever, once I've paid zakah once in my life, I don't have to pay zakah anymore. They probably have an investment which is earning them some money. It's got saved up somewhere. They think, okay, if I've paid zakah on that investment once, it means it's over, I'm done. No, that's not how it works. Every year you calculate your zakatable assets and you pay a zakah on all the surplus wealth that you have, unless your zakatable assets have diminished or decreased below the nisab. If not, you continue paying zakah on a yearly basis. Some people think that you have to inform the recipients that you are giving them zakah. They've got this misconception that if you're giving someone zakah, you have to be making clear to them that this money that I'm giving you, it's zakah. No, you don't have to do that. As long as you've made the intention that this money that I'm paying is zakah, that is sufficient. There's no need for you to announce to the zakah beneficiary or recipient that what they are getting is zakah. Another misconception people have, your wealth must be held for a year. So this means nisab must be held for a year. So the key word here is wealth. We're not talking about any general wealth, because sometimes you may have money, but that money may be below nisab. And some money that you have may not be zakatable wealth. So it's very, very important to understand that what you must hold for a year is the nisab amount. If your surplus wealth is the nisab or is over and above the nisab, that is what you consider to be wealth that you need to pay zakah on. Okay, now we're moving into the technical or the finalities with regards to zakah. So you must have learned that the formula for zakah liability is what? You take all your zakatable assets, you minus your liabilities. I'm sure there were certain conditions and explanations that were touched on in the past as to what type of liabilities you take on. I won't go into those details right now, unless you really want to know. Maybe in the end you can ask a question. So you take your zakatable assets and you minus your liabilities, and that gives you your net zakatable assets. And then after you've got, what is your net zakatable assets, you multiply that by 2.5%. And that gives you the amount of zakah that you have to pay. Right? So just in brief, just so that as a refresher, as a reminder that people know what are zakatable assets. We know zakatable assets are generally your liquid assets, like your money, your gold, your silver, debtors, people who owe you money, especially in business setup. All right. And some people are into farming. So people have livestock. They've got sheep, they've got cows, they've got camels and so forth. These, obviously, they've got their own nisab, but it's important for us to understand that these are zakatable assets. Agricultural products as well. If you're a person who's farming barley, dates, and any other type of agricultural produce, they have their own zakatable, they are zakatable as well. And then you've got minerals and that which are also zakatable. So it's very, very important to understand, because we know that everything that we own is not zakatable. Because people generally pay in most instances, especially in modern times, you pay more in liquid assets. Like people would have cash equivalents, your vouchers or something like that are cash equivalents. You've got investments which are shares and unit trusts. You've got policies. You've got retirement savings. You've got gold, silver, and jewelry. You've got digital assets, business assets. Right, so cash and cash equivalents, those are the main ones. Like money that you have in the bank, you cannot say this is not money. It's not my money because it's in the bank. So your business assets are like your stock, your debtors, your cash, and investments. Now, what is the framework of Zakah calculation? You remember these conditions, we done it in the previous weeks. So what's very important to understand that before I become liable to pay Zakah, that money must be my ownership. So the question you ask yourself, do I have full ability or power to dispose of that money, to do anything I like with that money? That explanation was given in the past weeks. Right? Growth. This means this item that I have, does it have the potential to grow? For example, trading stock has a potential to grow via sale. If you sell your trading stock, by you not selling it, you cannot say it's not zakatable. The fact that it's got the potential to grow, it becomes liable for you to pay zakah on. You find agricultural produce growth. They grow by themselves. They multiply. If you've got animals, they grow by themselves. They multiply. Gold and all other currencies, they all the time increasing in value. And then you've got the other condition, which is nisab. Nisab was discussed in detail as well. That refers to the threshold or the amount that you need to have in your possession in order for you to become liable to pay zakah. And then the aspect of whole, meaning the lunar cycle. So remember, you don't pay zakah on a monthly basis, neither do you pay zakah on the Gregorian calendar. You pay zakah on the lunar calendar. So the money that you receive today and is above nisab, if you're holding that money for an entire lunar year, the following year, you calculate that money and add on whichever other additional assets you may have, and then now you are considered to be a person that has to pay zakah. You see, you fulfilled ownership, you fulfilled growth, you fulfilled nisab, you fulfilled whole. Now you are considered to be someone that needs to pay zakah. So now finally, making it putting pen on paper. So you've got two types of payers. You've got someone who's an annual payer, meaning they've been paying zakah probably for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, they've been paying zakah annually. I'll share with you what is the difference between an annual payer and someone that is just a new payer. For now, let's just deal with regards to the annual payer. Someone that has been paying zakah annually, the first thing they do, you list all your zakatable assets. That's the first most important thing. You look, what zakatable assets do I possess? You list all of them down, whether you're writing it on a pad or whether you say writing it on your phone or whether you're doing it on our Zakah app on the SANZAF website, wherever you're doing it. You write all your zakatable assets and then you list them. And then you determine if you've reached nisab. Once you've got all your zakatable assets written down, saved on your phone, now you calculate how much are they worth. If they're above the nisab, then you move on. If your zakatable assets are above the nisab, you move on to the next step. What is the next step? You list all your deductible liabilities. So all monies that you owe, you list them down. So probably there's some expenses that you need to pay for this month. There's some debts that you've committed to, for this month, for this particular period. There's liabilities. As someone who's a business owner, modern businesses, there's constantly creditors and debtors that are in and out. So there's creditors that you're owing people probably to pay them for all the goods that you purchase from them. You minus all of that, and then whatever is left after minusing your liabilities, that becomes now your net zakatable assets. So liabilities to determine your net zakatable assets. Finally, once you've got your net zakatable assets, like we did in the previous slide, and you've got the amount of how much it is, you you multiply that by 2.5%, and then the amount that shows you there, it's that amount that you need to pay in zakah. So you don't pay zakah on all the zakatable assets, you pay on the 2.5%. That's why it's important to multiply all your zakatable assets by 2.5%. Once you've calculated it and you're ready to pay, you say Bismillah, you make your intention for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you ask Allah to accept from you, and you make your payment. Okay, I made a distinction in the previous slide that there's a difference between someone who's an annual payer, they've been paying zakah, and someone who's a first-time payer. So this scenario happens in a situation where someone may receive a lump sum of money. All along, they had no nisab. This is an individual who was just living from month to month. They did not have any amount of nisab, amount of wealth that was above the nisab. But it just so happens that Allah blesses them with wealth in any other form. Now, when this happens, what happens? They fulfilling the first condition of zakah, which is ownership. They've got money which belongs to them. Growth. Remember, cash and all liquid assets, they are growth. They've got the potential to grow. And then they fulfilling the nisab immediately. But there's one condition which has not come into play as yet. What condition is this? This is the condition of whole. Remember, we said once you receive a lump sum of money and that money is above the nisab, that does not immediately obligate you to pay zakah. That money that you received, an entire year has to pass over that money that you've received now as someone that has not paid zakat before. An entire year, lunar year, has to pass, and then the following year, you determine what date was it when I received that money, and that becomes your date of annual payment of your zakah. So important to determine that. And if it so happened that you received that money, it was a lump sum, and during the year, before the same date comes again in the following year, you realize you've spent all the money, or you've spent the money to such an extent that it is now again below nisab. If it's below nisab, then there's nothing that you can do. You are not someone that is above the nisab. So the condition falls. One of the conditions falls away. So that remains your date. You could have received this money in Muharram, in Rajab, in Sha'ban, Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah. That is the date where you could have received your money. It is not necessarily that you should have received it in Ramadan, or if you receive that money and say next Ramadan. Now it just so happens that it's Ramadan, but I'm just saying you can receive it in any other month, and that becomes your date of payment. And then you follow the normal steps as the annual zakah payer would do, and you pay your zakah in that way. Just to bring you to speed, if you go onto the SANZAF zakah website, or even on Google, you just search, SANZAF zakah calculator. You will find that there's it's an app, or it's a web calculation which helps and tries to make it easy for people who just want ease of calculation. So if you go onto that web calculator, it gives you all the options of the type of wealth that you have. Maybe you've got silver with this much, you've got gold with this much, you've got stock with this much. And then in the end, it gives you the final amount of zakah that you need to pay. So this is just as a matter of ease, to facilitate for people to make it easy for them to pay the zakah. If you are technologically savvy, I think this is a good option to embark upon. Otherwise, if you feel no, you would rather do it on a paper and make sure that it is clear, and then do an EFT, that is also fine. From our side, that is it for today. I'm sure if there's any questions or there's any issues that needs clarification, you are most welcome, inshallah, to pose it, to bring it forward. Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Maulana, that there's a box in the called Q&A. If you stop sharing, you'll be able to see it. There are a few questions in there, I think about 5.
Let's look at the questions. It says Q&A, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Should we go ahead with the questions?
Yes, you can. Bismillah.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I currently work in the UK, but I spend most of my salary in my home country in Uganda. Is it correct to compute the nisab and pay my zakah in Ugandan shillings rather than a British pounds? You want to answer that, Feroz?
Oh,
Or should
me.
I?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
You can answer the questions, Maulana, unless you want me to. So let me know when you want me to answer them.
Okay. Yeah, so the person says I currently work in the UK and I spend most of my salary in my home country in Uganda. It is correct. So wherever you are, whichever country you are in, whether you're in Uganda, you're in South Africa, you're in Malaysia, you do the conversion rate. Every country has got a conversion rate. So if you're paying your money in Ugandan shillings, let's say you're earning 20 pounds in the UK. You cannot come to Uganda and say that is 20 shillings. All you do is just the conversion. What is it worth in your country? That conversion, and you pay it according to that. So that's what it is. Unless you pay your zakah in Britain, in the UK, then you pay according to that currency. Wherever you pay your zakah, you pay it according to what the currency of the country is. And that makes it easy for you. So you don't have to, now you're in Uganda, now you want to now try to pay in pounds in Uganda. You just convert it. How do you calculate and give the zakah in kind? So if you're running a business, so remember, when we're talking about giving zakah in kind, we're not talking about like you've got a suit, you've got a suit that you've not been using for the last 10 years at home, or you've got a wedding dress that you don't know what to do with it. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the businessman that probably has goods. They're selling goods and, probably food items or things that are generally will be very beneficial and the poor would benefit from them. Or, for example, maybe there was a disaster in a particular region. People's houses flew, the zinc flew away, the bricks were destroyed. And this person happens to be someone who deals in bricks and they sell all of these things. And in this case, we know that the poor would need this kind of a thing in this particular disaster that has happened. It is most ideal to give them this kind of stuff instead of them trying to look for it themselves. In that situation, then it's fine to give your zakah in kind. Unlike trying to give now bricks to someone that doesn't need bricks. So we're talking about someone that is running a business in this instance. Then you pay your zakah in kind in that way. So you calculate the value of it, right? You calculate the value of the goods. If you want me to go into details, so generally, the policy that SANZAF has in terms of how do you calculate the value of your goods or your trading stock, we take the proxy or the ruling of willing buyer and willing seller. So this means if you had to take all your stock and sell it and had to sell it all at once to someone who's willing to buy them, how much would you sell all of your items for? And how much would the person be willing to come? So you sort of make a type of discretion. I don't want to go into the rationale and the details of why we've come up with this policy, but there's a rationale behind it. So generally, you calculate your stock and then you use the proxy of willing buyer and willing seller, and that's how you would evaluate your stock and calculate your zakah on that. If you want further details, it's not a problem. I mean, we can discuss this. Our emails will be shared, and I'm sure contact numbers will be shared. We can give you more clarity if you're still not clear. Is an investment in sukuk a zakatable asset? Feroz, would you like to answer this one? Is an investment in sukuk a zakatable asset?
Okay, shukran Maulana. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So when we look at sukuk, so sukuk is generally what people would refer to as an Islamic bond. So it's not your typical conventional bonds, because usually when you look at conventional bonds, that obviously the bondholder would earn interest. However, when you're referring to a sukuk, this actually represents ownership in a actual physical asset or business or project, with the objective of it making profits or earning rental income, etc. So yes, sukuk, falls in the category of assets that are zakatable. So yes, you would pay zakah on sukuks. Remember, there are different categories of sukuks. You get ijara, and ijara is basically where you're leasing something. So when we're looking at the underlying asset of a lease, so typically when we look at capital investments, the property itself is generally not zakatable, but the rental income would be. So always look at the underlying assets within the sukuk. If you look at the mudara sukuk, so this is obviously a profit sharing agreement. So here you've got to look at, as well as the musharaka, which is the equity, look at the market value of these assets, and you'd pay zakah based on the market value of those assets. So yes, sukuks are zakatable.
Okay, shukran for that answer, Feroz. On which date does my whole start? The date when I receive my first paycheck that meets the nisab, or the day that my savings first meet the nisab? Yeah, so good. It's a question. We covered it in a way. So you remember we mentioned that you don't pay zakah on your salary. So the correct part is your option 2, the day that my savings first meet the nisab. So the surplus amount, the surplus wealth when you started saving, when your savings meet the nisab, that's when your date begins, not when your salary. Because in most instances, people receive salaries every month that are above nisab, but all that nisab is consumed for your needs. Should you not announce to the recipient that you are giving them zakah? What if they are not zakatable? That is above nisab, will zakah be considered disseminated? So generally, when you are about to give someone zakah, you more or less can make out whether the person they in need of zakah. You can see their state, right? So generally, organizations will do due diligence before even that. There's a difference between someone coming to an organization, because remember, organizations are vehicles of distributing zakah of people who have given the zakah. They're distributing it on their behalf. But you as an individual payer, under general circumstances, you can see your neighbor is struggling. You can see your aunt is struggling. You can see, someone, your brother, or people generally around you. There's more or less an idea that you can see that the person is struggling. So in this instance, there would be less due diligence for you as a zakah payer, as opposed to an organization which has to go through very stringent rules, because now they want to make sure that that amana is fulfilled in the most strictest manner. So you can more or less make out, and if you're still not comfortable, then you go further, whichever steps that are at least not going to undermine the person's dignity or infringe on their personal rights. There's ways that you try if you're still feeling not comfortable. You feel, I can see they are zakatable, but there's other elements that I think to dig further. You can ask someone who may know, or you can fish out in various ways. So there's no sin in you trying to do that. But once your heart is comfortable to say, this person, I can give them zakah, that's sufficient.
Maulana, can I just add, if, for example, they're not sure whether the person is zakatable or not, so they've done the inquiry, like you said, what they can then do is they can actually then tell the person that they are giving them zakah, because generally when somebody, because we don't always understand everybody's financial circumstances, at every given point in time, that person would then refuse to say, well, sorry, I actually can't accept zakah. And when the person actually does accept zakah, then you can be content in your heart that then this person is aware and that you've done the necessary inquiry, and that would be sufficient, inshallah.
So the next question is, I have a question. One person approached me so that I can help him funding his daughter's marriage. He is vegetable seller. I'm unable to identify whether he's eligible to take zakah, and I'm feeling reluctant to ask from him whether he's eligible or not. What should I do? So this is similar to the previous question. I think you should do the most due diligence as far as possible. And like Feiruz says, if you're still unsure, then ask him. I mean, if you're feeling shy and you're still not comfortable, then the best thing that you can do is to ask them. You cannot be shy beyond the thing of now not asking them if you're still feeling uncomfortable. Next question. If someone has a loan on his house, can he deduct the loan from his zakatable assets? So generally, when you studied with regards to deductible liabilities or deductible debts, remember you've got long-term liabilities and you've got short-term liabilities. So the advice that is generally given is that when you subtracting your liabilities, you subtract your liabilities for the current month, right? Like for example, you've got rental to pay, you've got food to buy, you've got petrol expenses, you've got all of that. Those are, these are the liabilities for the current month. You are not allowed to deduct long-term liabilities unless in a situation where, for example, your long-term liability is something that is due within this zakah year. So generally houses, you pay it over 10 years, 15 years, you cannot deduct the entire amount because this will lead to people not ever paying zakah, especially in this day and age where most people, we are living under debt, our lifestyles are under debt. The phone is on a contract, the house you're paying off, the car you're paying off. If you have to deduct all of those liabilities, you may end up not having to pay zakah ever. Any addition to that, Feroz?
No, Maulana, shukran. Oh, good.
Okay. How do you adjust for zakah prepaid as the amount prepaid has reduced your wealth at the zakah valuation? So I guess this person is trying to say they've been paying monthly before the zakah date was due. Now they realize that the zakah valuation that, what, I've paid extra. So now you're asking, how do you adjust? If you've paid extra, it is considered to be extra. It is a nafil extra that you've paid, and Allah will reward you for that. Because you cannot say now you're going to take back that money. Once you've paid, you prepaid it in any case. That money is gone. So Allah will reward you for the extra that you paid. And we make dua that Allah increase you and grant you barakah. Because you made the payments on a monthly basis on the best estimate that you could come up with. So we can't say now go and claim that zakah back. This is not like your country's taxes where you claim tax back. Once you've paid it, it's paid.
Maulana, just quickly, in terms of the way I understood the question, it's they've paid the zakah in advance, right? So they've paid monthly payments before the zakah valuation date. But now, obviously, those payments has reduced the surplus wealth. So they're asking the question, how does that then affect, because they've already paid zakah in advance and it's reduced their surplus wealth. I think with that in mind is that because you've paid the amount is gone. So whatever wealth you have left, that is the surplus wealth that you actually have in your ownership on the day you're doing your calculation. So do the calculation based on the wealth that you have, and then whatever you've paid in advance would just be an advance payment on the liability that you owe. So I trust that clarifies the answer to the question. If not, maybe just put just a following up question to that if we didn't answer it correctly in terms of our understanding.
No. I understand that zakah can be calculated on a lunar or solar year. Please clarify. So generally, the advice that is given is that that's the default. The default is you calculate your zakah on the lunar year, right? But if it so happened that you have calculated on the solar year, I think remember the lunar year is shorter than the solar year. There's an addition of days. Feroz, how many? There's a certain percentage that they work out as an addition, because then that means you've extended the period of what you're supposed to have paid.
So it's 2.577.
Okay.
If you're using the lunar calendar, the Gregorian calendar.
Yes, yeah. So your calculation would be 2.577. Yeah, 577. You just what you call it? You just factoring those additional days that are there in the solar year. So, but it's best to keep it according to the lunar year. It makes your life easier, inshallah. I don't know. Okay, I seem to be skipping. Okay, done. Assalamu alaikum. Hope stock shares and asset investments also count as surplus amounts and liable for zakah, right? Do we need to pay zakah on profit or just on investment stock, share, investments, stock share, cash value? I don't seem to understand. I'm not clear with this question.
Okay, so Molina, maybe I just have a better understanding, maybe in terms of, I think, what the attendee is asking, in that whether stock shares and asset investments are zakatable, and you pay on the capital or do you pay on the profit? So based when you look at, and I think we went through shares, we went through any investments that you have, obviously they are zakatable. If you look at stock shares, generally, it is a share that you have in a company, which technically are shares that you have in the underlying zakatable assets. So if you have access to the financial statements, you're supposed to pay zakah only on those zakatable assets in those companies. But when you don't have access to these financial statements, we generally just say, just take the market value of these shares. You have to pay market value on the total of the shares, not just on the increase or in the profit of these shares. So just be mindful that it includes both capital as well as the profit. So it's the total market value of these shares.
The next question says, what are the Islamically acceptable best practices of due diligence of zakah recipients? Yeah, so remember, I mean, so generally, SANZAF they've got certain guidelines or certain policies or certain ways in which we do due diligence before we release zakah to recipients. So, for example, we'll ask for, bank statements from the individual. Sometimes we'll do house visits. And sometimes we'll ask other general questions in terms of the type of assets that are in their possession. So you do as far as brings comfort to your heart that you've done due diligence, and then you pay the zakah after you've done that. Because what's important also that you don't want to infringe into a person's dignity. Now you're doing things that are going beyond what even Allah has asked you to do. We know during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, nowadays we put more stricter measures because we just want to be extra sure, where people can bring their bank statements and so forth. But if you look at the practices in the past, there were no banks, there was no thing. A person could have hidden money underground. How do you know? As best as possible, you ask them, do you have extra money? Do you have extra cash? Do you have any? They tell you, and some sort of maybe inquiring as to whether this person is poor or not. And that's best as you can. So based on context, based on situations, based on timing, you do something that will bring comfort to your heart, that this person is zakatable. And once you've reached itminan, comfort of the heart, then you do due diligence. And like Feroz mentioned previously, if you feel you need to ask the person, you can ask them. And if they tell you I'm zakatable, then they're zakatable. Allah is not going to question you for things that are unseen, that you do not know. So, but just be careful on being too infringing on someone's privacy, where by the time they receive your 5 pounds of zakah, they've been stripped of all the dignity and honor and respect that they ought to have had. That is more serious harm than you after doing diligence and make a mistake, and hopefully you wouldn't. Yeah, so that's typically how we do it Islamically. Our personal house is not subject to zakah. Can we deduct the loan on the house? Our personal house is not subject to zakah. Is this similar to the previous question, Feroz, the way you understand it about the one?
No. So the question is, the house is a non-zakatable asset, right? But they have a debt of a bond, a payment of, let's say, 5,000 Rand. Is the bond payment 5,000 Rand deductible, seeing that the asset is a non-zakatable asset? That's the question.
Okay, can you answer that the way you understand it?
Okay, so the way it works with deductible assets, deductible liabilities or debt is that whatever is due immediately, so it doesn't matter whether it is your payment of your bond or your payment of your personal car, because remember, personal car is also a personal asset in that it's not as attracts a car. So irrespective of whether it's a non-zakatable asset from which the debt is coming from, the immediate expenditure is allowed as a deduction from your surplus zakatable assets. So you are allowed to deduct the bond, your installment of your car repayment, school fees, your municipal expenses, etc., are allowed as a deduction because they are necessary expenditure. So yes.
Salam, thank you for insightful teachings. I have some amount of money deposited in Wadia account since September, and it is in US dollars. Should I pay Zakah for it? I don't know what is Wadia account. I don't know if you are.
So Wadia is more like a savings account from a Sharia compliant product perspective. So it's basically like a savings account. So whatever is in your savings account at the time you're doing your zakah calculation would be part of your basket of zakatable assets and would be part of your zakah that's due on those assets. So yes, if you have a different currency, so you're saying it is in US dollars, but let's say you're living in the UK, you have to translate that account into your pounds to be able to obviously pay zakah in whatever currency you're paying in at that time.
Okay, I think this person is just clarifying on follow up on the previous question. So regarding the investment in sukuk, I was referring to sukuk as salam. I was thinking it should be exempted since it's like investment properties, which are generally non-zakatable assets. So I guess this person is just adding.
Okay, so when it comes to sukuks, remember there are various, like we mentioned, categories of sukuks that you can get. And the one I mentioned was the ijara. So the ijara is usually the least, where you lease an asset. And I said, like the capital asset, the property itself is not zakatable, but the rental income would be. With as-salam, generally they use as-salam for agriculture. And for agriculture, you have to take the market value of what that sukuk as-salam is. So unless I'm confused why the as-salam is used for property, generally as-salam is used for agriculture and ijara is used for property. And like I mentioned earlier, for the property itself is not zakatable, but the rental income would be. Okay.
Seems like that's all the questions we have for today. We've covered. I don't see any other questions.
Assalamu alaikum, Jazakallah, Sheikh. Is there any questions, Feroz, or we can close?
No, we can close. I thought there was another question, but it just says thank you. I think for the sukuk comment. Shukran.
I thank you very much again.
Someone raised their hand. I don't know if you want to take that or you just want to close now.
You want to take live questions? I can ask them to unmute.
All right.
Whether you are allowed to speak.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Does anyone hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Yeah, I have a question about the Waqf Zakat model. What a little bit about the Waqf model, how they can benefit us in the business and trading. The Waqf model.
Waqf Zakat model.
Yeah.
Okay, that is something I'm not familiar with. I don't know if Feroz, I don't understand the principles of that. Maybe if Feroz has understanding of that, you can.
Last time I read an article about. Yeah.
So you're referring to the Waqf model versus the Zakah model?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically with Waqf, we obviously have a pool of capital funding that we get for which we need to invest, and we benefit from the use and from the funds that's generated from the capital. And you can use that for various projects, whether it would be social development, social welfare, etc. However, the capital would remain. When it comes to the Zakah model, we're not allowed to invest Zakah because we need to distribute Zakah as soon as possible. As an institution, we have up to 12 months because most ulama has advised that we as an institution have up to 12 months to distribute Zakah. So we do not invest Zakah with the same objective as Waqf, because Waqf, you've got to retain the capital. With Zakah, you've got to distribute all the funds within the capital, within the funds pool. So that's a different model.
Okay. So in the work model, let's suppose I have a property and I just work it into the as a donation. So
Okay.
I gave it as a donation. So how this donation will give me a benefits?
Is this from a Waqf perspective?
Yeah, work perspective.
So the way you'll benefit is from the rental income. So the rental income would be used for whatever projects or development that needs to happen in the community. The building, the property will remain Waqf.
So isn't the income and the funds coming from the work model are in the way of Allah as a donation?
Yeah, it would be a way of a donation, which you're donating to whichever Waqf fund that would obviously have oversight over the property, unless I'm misunderstanding the question.
All right, brother Luqman, we can take this question because I don't see this question relevant to zakat, and we can take only zakat relevant question. This question you can send to SANZAF separately. Perhaps they will be able to brief you on that, Maulana, or you can send to TAIF. We can connect you for answering the question in detail. All right.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, Jazakumullah.
We can look
Yeah.
into it, inshallah. Shukran.
Jazakallah Sheikh for your time for South African National Zakat Funds. I would say that it's been an honor of working with you all and learning all through these 5 sessions. And I appreciate all the people who have joined these sessions continuously consecutive for this whole month and benefited from it. Last few words from Sheikh from you so that we can close the session, inshallah.
Yeah, and I would like to say, Barakallah, Jazakumullah khairan Taif for this important session, for this platform. Like we mentioned in the beginning, the institution of Zakah on knowledge, acquiring knowledge thereof, it is something that tends to be neglected. And hence you would find people reaching a point or the Zakah threshold. They're supposed to be paying zakah, which is wajib. Remember, it is wajib. It is not something that we should be taking for granted. So these type of platforms, these type of sessions and seminars are things that the general public should be seeking out at all times. Because if you consider that zakah is one of the pillars from amongst the 5 pillars of Islam, it is not something that you can just slip over and don't make the effort to acquire the knowledge and make sure that you do due diligence, even if it means you make sure you pay for the studies, because it is something which is important, it's a pillar of Islam. So we really thank you for this partnership. We really thank you for the opportunity. We're looking forward to future engagements and partnership as well. It should not be only in Ramadan where these kind of platforms or this type of knowledge sharing opportunities are done. It should be done throughout the year. Like we mentioned, zakah can be paid any time of the year, not only in the month of Ramadan. Jazakumullah.
Sister Feroz, your last word so that we can close the session.
Rahman Rahim. I just want to reiterate what Maulana Ibrahim said, but I'm not going to repeat it, except to say that we say Jazakumullah khairan to all the attendees, because I think if we don't have the attendees, we cannot really have these sessions. So we say Jazakumullah khairan to everybody that, have managed to attend all 5. Alhamdulillah, we really appreciate your desire to learn and desire to learn on a topic that is very neglected. And I trust that these sessions were beneficial to you so that you may continue to spread the knowledge to your families and friends, etc. And if there's anything that we've said that was wrong, that is obviously from our side, and whatever we have said that was of benefit, that is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So please forgive us if we said anything wrong, because sometimes, you can be very nervous when you're on these platforms. But having said all that, Jazakumullah khairan, may you have a blessed Ramadan going forward. Please keep us in your du'as, and may Allah grant you everything that is good. Ameen, Ya Rab.
Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. All the people who have attended the session, inshallah, following week, because there is a huge number, so you will be receiving your certificates for the sessions, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Wa barakatuh.